قال الحافظ أبو بكر البيهقي رحمه الله في مناقب الشافعي. Said Hafiz Abu Bakr Al-Bayhaqi, may Allah have mercy on him, in Manaqib al-Shafi'i. ما نصه, quote, باب ما جاء عن الشافعي رحمه الله في مجانبة أهل الأهواء. Chapter concerning what came from Ash-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, concerning avoiding the people of devious desires. وَبُغْضِهِ إِيَّاهُمْ, and his hatred of them. وَذَمِّهِ كَلَامَهُمْ, and his dispraise of their talk. وَإِزْرَائِهِ بِهِمْ, I'm not sure what Isra means. وَتَدْقِيقِهِ عَلَيْهِمْ, and his being relentless on them. وَمُنَاظَرَتِهِ إِيَّاهُمْ, and his debating them. I'm going to not translate the chains, except for the last name or two. Al-Rabi' ibn Sulaiman said, I heard Ash-Shafi'i saying, لَأَنْ يَلْقَ اللَّهَ الْعَبْدُ بِكُلِّ ذَنْبٍ مَا خَلَى الشِّرْكَ بِاللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَنْ يَلْقَاهُ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْهَوَى. For this, literally it says, for the slave to meet Allah with every sin other than shirk is better than meeting him with anything of devious desire. So it means for the slave to encounter the judgment of Allah, to come back to life and be judged for his deeds, for him to come back to life and be judged for his deeds and have every sin other than shirk is better than having a deviant belief. I heard from Sheikh Ghiyath, he said that according to this is, some could count having a devious belief the worst sin under kufr. So everyone who opposes Ahlul Sunnah in conviction, they are all called Ahlul Ahwa, the people of desires. The Shiites, the Khawarij, the Mu'tazila. So Yunus ibn Abdul A'la said, قلت لمحمد ibn Idris Ash-Shafi'i. I said to Muhammad ibn Idris Ash-Shafi'i, قال صاحبنا الليث بن سعد, our companion or colleague or fellow Al-Layth ibn Sa'd said, لو رأيت صاحب هوى يمشي على الماء ما قبلته. Had I seen a person with devious beliefs walking upon the water, I still would not accept him. قال الشافعي أما إنه قصر. Ash-Shafi'i said, oh, he didn't even say it good enough. لو رأيته يمشي في الهواء ما قبلته. Had I seen him walking in the air, I would not accept him. And this means that he would not be, such a one would not be amongst the people of karamas. And he would not be trustworthy. Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ishaq, I heard Yunus ibn Abdul A'la saying, أتيت الشافعي بعدما كلم حفصا الفرد. I came to Ash-Shafi'i after he spoke to Hafs al-Fard. فقال, and he said, غبت عنا يا أبا موسى. He said, you missed it, Abu Musa. Literally saying, you were absent from us, Abu Musa. So it's like he's saying, you missed it. You missed it, Abu Musa. لقد طلعت من أهل الكلام على شيء والله ما توهمته قط. I have become aware about, he's saying, concerning the people of devious rhetoric, I have become aware of something, I swear by Allah, that I have never imagined. وَلَأَنْ يُبْتَلَ الْمَرْءُ بِجَمِيعِ مَا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُ مَا خَلَى الشِّرْكَ بِاللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَنْ يَبْتَلِيَهُ اللَّهُ بِالْكَلَامِ. For a person to be afflicted with all of what Allah forbade instead of shirk, other than shirk, anything other than shirk, for someone to be afflicted with every sin other than shirk in Allah is better than for Allah to inflict him with kalam. So imagine how bad that guy must have been to surprise Ash-Shafi'i. قلت أي البيهقي, I say, meaning Al-Bayhaqi, إنما أراد الشافعي رحمه الله بهذا الكلام حفصا وأمثاله من أهل البدع. Ash-Shafi'i only intended, may Allah have mercy upon him, by this talk, Hafs and his likes of the people of heresies. وهذا مراده بكل ما حكي عنه في ذم الكلام وذم أهله. And this is his intent in all of what was reported about him in dispraising the Kalam and dispraising its people. غير أن بعض الرواة أطلقه وبعضهم قيده. However, some of the narrators who reported what Ash-Shafi'i said, they reported it in general words. So like Ash-Shafi'i saying, it's better than for him to get involved in Kalam. And others, they recited it with restriction, meaning they said it's better for him than to be involved with the people of devious desires. وَفِي تَقْيِيدِ مَنْ قَيَّدَهُ دَلِيلٌ عَلَى مُرَادِهِ. And in the restriction of who restricted it, there is evidence of what he intended. There is evidence of his intent. Abu al-Walid Al-Jarud said, دخل حفص الفرد على الشافعي فكلمه. Hafs al-Fard entered in on Ash-Shafi'i and spoke to him. ثم خرج إلينا الشافعي فقال لنا. Then Ash-Shafi'i came out to us and said to us, لأن يلقى الله العبد بذنوب مثل جبال تهامة خير له من أن يلقاه باعتقاد حرف مما عليه هذا الرجل وأصحابه. He said, for the slave to encounter the judgment of Allah with sins like the mountains of Tihama is better for him than to encounter the judgment with believing a single letter that this man and his fellows are upon. وَكَانَ يَقُول, and he used to say, a Hafs, بِخَلْقِ الْقُرْآنِ. And he, meaning Hafs, used to speak about the Quran being created. وهذه الروايات تدل على مراده بما أطلق عنه فيما تقدم. And these reports prove his intent in what was generally reported about him previously, in the previous reports that we cited. وفيما لم يذكر هنا, and in what is not even mentioned here. If there's something reported from Ash-Shafi'i not mentioned here, where he generally dispraises Kalam and he generally dispraises the people of Kalam, he means the deviant people, not the Kalam itself, not the Kalam of Ahlul Sunnah. وكيف يكون كلام أهل السنة والجماعة مذموما عنده وقد تكلم فيه وناظر من ناظره فيه. And how would the kalam of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah be dispraised according to Ash-Shafi'i? وَقَدْ تَكَلَّمَ فِيهِ, when he used it. That's what it means. تَكَلَّمَ فِيهِ. He did that himself. وَنَاظَرَ مَنْ نَاظَرَهُ فِيهِ, and he debated whoever he debated using it. وكشف عن تمويه من ألقى إلى سمع بعض أصحابه من أهل الأهواء شيئا مما هم فيه. And he exposed the camouflage of who delivered, من ألقى إلى سمع, of who delivered to the hearing of some of his fellows amongst the people of devious desires something that they are upon. So from Al-Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, أنه قال, that he said, حضرت الشافعية أو حدثني أبو شعيب. I was with Ash-Shafi'i, I was in his presence, or Abu Shu'aib told me if I wasn't actually there. إلا أني أعلم أنه حضر عبد الله بن عبد الحكم. But I do know that present in the story that I want to tell you here was Abdullah ibn Abdul Hakam, wa Yusuf ibn Amr ibn Yazid, and Yusuf ibn Amr ibn Yazid, wa Hafsun al-Fard, and Hafs al-Fard, he was there. Wa kana Shafi'i yusammihi al-Munfarid, and Ash-Shafi'i used to call him al-Munfarid. And there was Hafs al-Fard, so they used to call him Hafs al-Fard, Hafs the unique. So Ash-Shafi'i used to call him Hafs al-Munfarid, Hafs the deviant. فسأل حفص عبد الله بن عبد الحكم فقال, So Hafs, he went to Abdullah ibn Abdul Hakam and said, ما تقول في القرآن? What do you say about the Quran? Meaning he wants to open a discussion and start debating. Those are the people of, those are the deviant people. And it could also be from amongst our amateurs, the amateurs amongst our own people. They start learning some proofs and some arguments, and then they open the debate. So absolutely not. We don't open the debate. We just prepare for it and we're ready for it. فَأَبَى أَنْ يُجِيبَهُ. So he refused to answer him. فَسَأَلَ يُوسُفَ بْنَ عَمْرٍ فَلَمْ يُجِبْهُ. Then he asked Yusuf ibn Amr and he didn't answer him. وَكِلَاهُمَا أَشَارَ إِلَى الشَّافِعِي. And both of them pointed to Ash-Shafi. They're saying, you want to talk to somebody about this? Talk to him. سَأَلَ الشَّافِعِي. And so he asked Ash-Shafi'i, فَاحْتَجَّ الشَّافِعِي. And then Ash-Shafi'i argued. فَطَالَتِ الْمُنَاظَرَةِ. And then the debate went long. وَغَلَبَ الشَّافِعِيُّ بِالْحُجَّةِ عَلَيْهِ. And Ash-Shafi'i dominated with argument over him. بِأَنَّ الْقُرْآنَ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٍ. That the Quran is the speech of Allah Ta'ala, not created. وَكَفَّرَ حَفْصًا الْفَرْدِ. And he made takfir on Hafs al-Fard. He deemed him a kafir. قال الربيع. Al-Rabi' said, فَلَقِيتُ حَفْصًا الْفَرْدِ. He said, I met Hafs al-Fard. I ran into him another time later. فَقَالَ أَرَادَ الشَّافِعِيُّ قَتْلِي. He said, Ash-Shafi'i wanted me killed. He wanted me killed. Meaning, that's why he made takfir on me. Ash-Shafi'i, he's using his influence. He's an influencer, and he called me a kafir so that they could kill me. But of course, that's not why. He called him a kafir because he was. Abu Shu'aib, the Egyptian, a sheikh amongst the people of Hadith, said, حضرت الشافعي محمد بن إدريس. I was in the presence of Ash-Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris. وعنده يوسف ibn Amr ibn Yazid وعبد الله ibn عبد الحكم في منزله. And with him was Yusuf, son of Amr, son of Yazid, and Abdullah, son of Abdul Hakam, in his house. I don't know whose house. في منزله, usually the pronoun goes back to the closest one. If that's the case here, then it's Abdullah ibn al-Hakam, Abdullah ibn Abdul Hakam's house. But it doesn't have to go back to the closest one, so I don't know for sure. فَدَخَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفْصٌ الْفَرْدِ. And then Hafs al-Fard came in. وَكَانَ مُتَكَلِّمًا مُنَاظِرًا. And he was a theologian and a debator. فَقَالَ لِيُوسُف. And so he said to Yusuf, مَا تَقُولُ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. What do you say about the Quran? فَقَالَ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ لَيْسَ عِنْدِي غَيْرُ هَذَا. He said, it is the speech of Allah. I don't have more than this, or other than this. وَجَعَلُوا يُحِيلُونَ عَلَى الشَّافِعِي. And they took to referring to Ash-Shafi'i, yani referring him. They took to referring him to Ash-Shafi'i. فَأَقْبَلَ حَفْصٌ الْفَرْدُ عَلَى الشَّافِعِي. So Hafs al-Fard approached Ash-Shafi'i. فَقَالَ إِنَّهُمْ يُحِيلُونَ عَلَيْكَ. And so he said, they are referring to you. فَقَالَ لَهُ الشَّافِعِي دَعْ هَذَا عَنْكَ. Ash-Shafi'i said, leave this alone. Leave this from yourself. فَلَمْ يَزَلْ بِهِ. But he didn't stop. He wouldn't quit. فَقَالَ لَهُ الشَّافِعِي. And so Ash-Shafi'i said to him, مَا تَقُولُ أَنْتَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. What do you say about the Quran? قَالَ أَقُولُ إِنَّهُ مَخْلُوقٌ. He said, I say it's created. قَالَ مِنْ أَيْنَ قُلْتَ. Ash-Shafi'i said, where did you say that from? قَالَ فَلَمْ يَزَلْ يَحْتَجُّ عَلَيْهِ حَفْصٌ الْفَرْدِ بِأَنَّهُ مَخْلُوقٌ. So Hafs didn't stop arguing against him that the Quran is created. وَيَحْتَجُّ الشَّافِعِيُّ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ بِأَنَّهُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٍ. And Ash-Shafi'i argued with him that it is the speech of Allah uncreated. حَتَّى كَفَّرَهُ الشَّافِعِيُّ وَقَطَعَهُ. Until Ash-Shafi'i deemed him as a kafir and silenced him. قال أبو شعيب. Abu Shu'aib said, وَحُجَجُهُمَا عِنْدِي فِي كِتَابٍ. Their arguments, both of their arguments, I have them in a book. Like he's saying, I wrote their whole debate down. So that's the type of time they were on in those old days. They had their books, they had their pens, they wrote down everything, and they memorized a lot too. So they were students, those scholars were students, they were people of knowledge. They weren't like me, a person of a lot of free time and playing around, subhanallah. قال أبو شعيب said فلما كان من الغد لقيني حفص الفرد في سوق الزجاج. So the next day, Hafs ran into me in the Zajjaj market. فقال أما رأيت ما صنع بالشافعي? Did you see what Ash-Shafi'i did to me? أحب أن يريهم أنه عالم. He wanted to show them that he was a scholar. ثم أقبل علي. And then he drew near me. فقال, and then he said, مع أنه ما تكلم أحد في هذا مثله. But no one other than him ever spoke about this like him. ولا أقدر منه على هذا. And ولا أقدر منه على هذا. Nor anyone, if there's a fatha here like I wrote it, nor anyone who's more capable than him, as if it's a fatha. ولا أقدر. There's no one more capable than him. وقد ذكرنا قبل هذا مناظرته مع حفص في زيادة الإيمان ونقصانه. And we have mentioned before this his debate with Hafs about the increase and decrease in faith. That's a mas'ala. The Ash'ari said faith increases and decreases. The Hanafi said faith does not increase or decrease. And in this case, they don't have a difference in opinion. They only have a difference in semantics, in terminology. So I don't know what was Hafs saying, if he was saying something different from both the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Ahmad ibn Mudrik al-Razi said, I heard from Abdullah ibn Salih, the scribe of Al-Layth, the writer of Al-Layth, saying, كنا عند الشافعي في مجلسه. We were with Ash-Shafi'i in his session. فجعل يتكلم في تثبيت خبر الواحد عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And so he took to discussing, confirming the narration of an individual from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, that it's not rejected because it's a mere individual reporting. فكتبناه, so we wrote it down. وذهبنا به إلى إبراهيم بن إسماعيل ibn Ulayya. And we took it to Ibrahim ibn Ismail ibn Ulayya. وكان من غلمان أبي بكر الأصم. And he was from the, I don't know what he means by ghilman here. Ghilman is a young person. Could be a slave boy, could be a servant, could even be a son. Ghulam. Ghilman is plural of ghulam. I don't think it's son here. So he was a ghulam, could be a young bull of Abu Bakr al-Assam. وكان مجلسه بمصر عند باب الضوال. And his session was in Egypt at Bab al-Dawal. فَلَمَّا قَرَأْنَاهُ عَلَيْهِ جَعَلَ يَحْتَجُّ بِإِبْطَالِهِ. So when we read it on him, he started arguing for its invalidity. فَكَتَبْنَا مَا قَالَ ابْنُ عُلَيَّةَ. So we wrote down what Ibn Ulayya said. وَذَهَبْنَا بِهِ إِلَى الشَّافِعِي. And then we took it to Ash-Shafi'i. فَنَقَضَهُ الشَّافِعِي. And then Ash-Shafi'i debunked it. وَتَكَلَّمَ بِإِبْطَالِ مَا قَالَهُ ابْنُ عُلَيَّةَ. And he spoke with invalidating what Ibn Ulayya said. وقال, and then Ash-Shafi'i said, ابن علية ضال قد جلس عند باب الضوال يضل الناس. He said Ibn Ulayya is dal, he's misguided, sitting at Bab al-Dawal, misguiding people. Yani, what's nice about what Ash-Shafi'i said here is just the wordplay. So he said Ibn Ulayya is dal, so he's misguided. Sitting at Bab al-Dawal has the same letters. يضل الناس, misguiding people. وبلغني عن يعقوب بن سفيان أنه حكى عن إبراهيم بن علية هذا وتكلم في القرآن بما لا أستجيز حكايته. And it reached me from Yaqub ibn Sufyan that he reported about Ibrahim ibn Ulayya, this Ibrahim ibn Ulayya, that he spoke about the Quran with what I do not permit to report. I don't permit anyone repeating his words. If you notice that when they took the lesson from Ash-Shafi about confirming the report of an individual, that it's acceptable if the conditions are fulfilled in the narration, what did they do? They took the lesson from Ash-Shafi'i. Then they ran into Ibn Ulayya. And then he started refuting what Ash-Shafi'i said. So they wrote it down. Then they went back to Ash-Shafi'i and they showed it to him. And then he refuted that. What did they do? They went back and forth. This is something that some people neglect to do. Especially in the beginning stages, when you're a beginner and you're just getting familiar and you want to be sure that you're learning what's right, you might need to encourage some people that don't just hear something and then somebody throws a doubt in your heart and you just stick with them. Take that and bring it back to the first ones that you learned from and show it to them. And actually that happened to me. First, I learned from AICP. And I was Muslim for about 9 months. And I learned very basic aqeedah. I learned what you might learn in khutbah, going to Jumu'ah every week and going to classes, not even all the time. But I just knew that Allah doesn't resemble the creations. And He exists without a place. And He doesn't change. And then I knew a few other things. So I had a friend that I used to go to his house up 60th Street. And there was a Wahhabi who used to be there. Those people, they used to eat haram meat, though. I knew that you couldn't eat the haram meat. So once one person in the house offered me some meat, I said, "Is that halal?" So there's a Wahhabi there, and he was offended by my question. So he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "What masjid do you go to, brother?" I told him, "I go to 45th Street." He said, "Oh, you go to the Habashi place." And I never even heard the word Habashi. I said, "Habashi? No, I think you mean the Wahhabi place down the street on 43rd Street." He said, "No, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those people who pray Southeast and they say that people have to make up their prayers for the past 20 years. And they say that Allah doesn't sit." And for me, that was like everything just went silent. And I said, "Well, Allah doesn't sit." And then he proceeded to refute me. And I didn't have the knowledge. I hadn't even heard about the hadith of the slave girl yet. And he told me the hadith of the slave girl. And then I asked him about the 3 mental judgments. I knew that. And he said, 3 mental judgments? For all I know, there's a 4th mental judgment. I didn't know how to answer that. So I was just like, what? I felt like, have I been deceived all this time? I know what they told me makes sense, but this guy just said a bunch of stuff. What's this hadith of the slave girl? The Prophet asked, "Where is Allah?" So I was so confused. MashaAllah. And I went to the library and I went to different musallas and I set an appointment with Sheikh Riyaf. And I asked him, I said, "You ever heard of the hadith of the slave girl?" He said, "Of course." May Allah have mercy on him. I hope he doesn't mind that I imitated his voice like that. And then he proceeded to explain for me. And he made me take notes, and he gave me questions to take back to that Wahhabi. And one of the questions was, "What do you say about the ijma'?" And then he had backup questions for that. So one day I went to the house at 60th Street. And nobody was home, but Allah willed for me to run into that guy. He walked past. And then I asked him, I said, what do you say about the ijma'? And this guy's, his eyebrows went up into his forehead, his eyes turned into saucers, and he literally turned and walked away from me. He didn't even want to get into the conversation. MashaAllah. So I always encourage any person who's still trying to find his footing, go back and forth. Take the arguments of the first one to the second one and the argument of the second to the first, and like that until you see who has the stronger argument. He was the one, wallahi, he was the one who set me on my course of Wahhabi slaying. If it wasn't for him, Allahu A'lam, maybe I would have turned out a different person. Because I said to myself, never again will anyone ever shut me down like that. Subhanallah. So anyway, so here, the point that's being made is that Ash-Shafi'i used to engage in kalam and he used to engage in debate, not one topic in particular, and not him only also. It's not special to, what's being said here is not special to only talking about the kalam in the Quran, but that's what they mostly talked about. And it's not special to Ash-Shafi'i only, but that's what most of these reports here are saying. And Shaykh has even more in Sarih al-Bayan from other Imams like Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Ishaq said, my father said to me, كلم الشافعي يوما بعض الفقهاء. Ash-Shafi'i one day spoke to one of the scholars or one of the jurists. فدقق عليه وحقق وطالب وضيق. And so he was precise on him and verifying, or maybe even means he was strict with him. وَطَالَبَ, and he sought evidence from him, he sought answers from him. وَضَيَّقَ, and he was tight on him. As if to say, Ash-Shafi'i was not gentle with him. فَقُلْتُ لَهُ, and so I said to him, يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ, O Abu Abdullah, that's Ash-Shafi'i, هَذَا لِأَهْلِ الْكَلَامِ لَا لِأَهْلِ الْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامِ. This is for the people of Kalam, meaning this way is for the people of Kalam, not the people of Halal and Haram. فَقَالَ أَحْكَمْنَا ذَاكَ قَبْلَ هَذَا. And so he said, we mastered that before this. As if he's saying, أَحْكَمْنَا ذَا قَبْلَ ذَا. We mastered that before that, or that before this. But usually ذَا, ذَاكَ is for something far. هَذَا is for something close. So as if he's saying, we mastered that before this. And he means, we mastered the science of kalam and the theological rhetoric and how to debate before we mastered the rules, the legal rules. And he means himself. When he said ahkamna, we, he means himself. Radiyallahu anhu. Al-Muzani said, دار بيني وبين رجل مناظرة. There happened between myself and a man a debate. فسألني عن كلام كاد أن يشككني في ديني. And so he asked me about some talk that was on the verge of making me doubt about my religion. Yani, he confused him. He asked him something that he was asked something that confused him. He didn't know how to answer it. As if, and it was such a strong fallacy that it was about to make him doubt about his religion. فَجِئْتُ إِلَى الشَّافِعِي. And so I came to Ash-Shafi'i. فَقُلْتُ لَهُ. And then I said to him, كَانَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ كَيْتَ وَكَيْتَ. What happened was this and that. قال فقال لي أين أنت. He said, Al-Muzani said, Ash-Shafi'i said to me, where are you? فقلت أنا في المسجد. I said, I'm in the masjid. فقال لي أنت في مثل تهران. So he said to me, you are in the likes of the Sea of Tehran. تلطمك أمواجه, and its waves are smacking you. هذه مسألة الملحدين, this is a case of the atheists. والجواب فيها كيت وكيت, and its answer is such and such. ولأن يبتلى العبد بكل ما خلق الله من مضاره خير له من أن يبتلى بالكلام. And for the slave to be afflicted with everything that Allah created that is harmful for him is better for him than to be afflicted with the kalam. قلت, Al-Bayhaqi says, I say, Ta'rana fi Bahr al-Qulzum. Ta'ran is in the Sea of Qulzum. I'm not sure what's Qulzum in English. يقال فيها غرق فرعون وقومه. It is said that in it, the Pharaoh and his people drowned. Yeah, maybe it's Suez, yeah. Yeah, Sheikh Abed said, لعله فيه. Maybe it's supposed to be fihi, but in the new copy, it's still fiha. So maybe al-Qulzum is feminine. فشبه الشافعي المزني فيما أورد عليه بعض أهل الإلحاد ولم يكن عنده جواب. And so Ash-Shafi'i likened al-Muzani concerning what was presented to him, or concerning what some of the people of atheism presented to him, while he did not have an answer. بمن ركب البحر في الموضع الذي أغرق الله فيه فرعون وقومه. He likened him to who is sailing in the sea in the place where Allah drowned the Pharaoh and his people. وأشرف على الهلاك, and he was on the verge of doom. ثم علمه جواب ما أورد عليه, and then he taught him the answer of what was presented to him. حتى زالت عنه تلك الشبهة, so that fallacy would fade from him. وفي ذلك دلالة على حسن معرفته بذلك, and in that is evidence of his good knowledge, or his good acquaintance with that. وأنه يجب الكشف عن تمويهات أهل الإلحاد, and that it is obligatory to uncover the camouflage of the people of atheism عند الحاجة إليه, when there is a need for that. وأراد بالكلام ما وقع فيه أهل الإلحاد, and what he meant by kalam here is what the people of atheism have fallen into. من الإلحاد, of atheism. وأهل البدع من البدع, and what the people of heresies have fallen into of heresies. والله أعلم, and Allah knows best. قال فأما استحبابه ترك الخوض فيه, and as for his preferring, Ash-Shafi'i's preferring, abandoning, delving into the kalam, والإعراض عن المناظرة فيه, and turning away from debating about it عند الاستغناء عنها, when there's no need for it. فقد كان رحمه الله يميل إليه مع معرفته به. He, may Allah have mercy upon him, he was inclined towards that, to abandon the debate while he was familiar with how to do so. Al-Rabi' said, قال رأيت الشافعي وهو نازل من الدرجة وقوم في المجلس يتكلمون في شيء من الكلام. He said, I saw a Shafi'i while he was coming down the steps, and some people were in the session, like some people hanging on the steps, debating, talking about something concerning kalam, fasah. And then Ash-Shafi'i shouted at them, وَقَالَ إِمَّا أَن تُجَاوِرُونَ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِمَّا أَن تَقُومُوا عَنَّا. He said, either you will be good neighbors or you will get up and move away from here. Al-Muzani said, يقول كنا على باب الشافعي نناظر في الكلام We were on or at the door of Ash-Shafi'i debating about some kalam. فَخَرَجَ إِلَيْنَا الشَّافِعِي. And then Ash-Shafi'i came out to us, وَسَمِعَ بَعْضَ مَا كُنَّا فِيهِ. And he heard some of what we were saying. فَرَجَعَ عَنَّا. And then he went back away from us. He went back in. فَمَا خَرَجَ إِلَيْنَا إِلَّا بَعْدَ سَبْعَةِ أَيَّامٍ. And he did not come out to us except after 7 days. ثُمَّ خَرَجَ. And then he came out. فَقَالَ. And he said, مَا مَنَعَنِي مِنَ الْخُرُوجِ إِلَيْكُمْ عِلَّةٌ عَرَضَتْ. There did not prevent me from coming out to you any sickness that happened. وَلَكِنْ لِمَا سَمِعْتُكُمْ تَتَنَاظَرُونَ فِيهِ. Rather, it was for what I heard you disputing about or debating about. أَتَظُنُّونَ أَنِّي لَا أُحْسِنُهُ. Do you think that I do not perfect that I am not an expert at that? لَقَدْ دَخَلْتُ فِيهِ حَتَّى بَلَغْتُ مِنْهُ مَبْلَغًا. I have delved into it, I have entered into that until I reached considerable depth. And this is a Shafi'i here. He's not bragging, he's just stating a fact. Sometimes you have to just state a fact. Humbleness has its place, but when it comes to benefiting the people and things like that and preserving the truth and all of that, then you say what's the fact. If that means that you need to mention a merit about yourself, then you do so. He said, أَتَظُنُّونَ أَنِّي لَا أُحْسِنُهُ. Do you think that I'm not an expert at it? لَقَدْ دَخَلْتُ فِيهِ. لَقَدْ دَخَلْتُ. That's my mistake. There, no qalqala here. Merge the dal into the dal. That's proper reading. That's not exclusive to Quran. لَقَدْ دَخَلْتُ فِيهِ حَتَّى بَلَغْتُ مِنْهُ مَبْلَغًا. By God, I have entered into it until I reached considerable depth. وَمَا تَعَاطَيْتُ شَيْئًا إِلَّا وَبَلَغْتُ فِيهِ مَبْلَغًا. And I did not engage in anything except that I have reached in it considerable depth. He's saying any field that I put my mind to, anything that I even tried to do, I perfected it. I became an expert at it. But that's because Ash-Shafi'i was an extreme alpha genius. It's like a very high prodigy, not normal. He died in his early 50s and he was one of the greatest scholars of Islam ever. Sheikh Abdullah said Ash-Shafi'i was more knowledgeable than Aisha. He said, وَمَا تَعَاطَيْتُ شَيْئًا إِلَّا وَبَلَغْتُ فِيهِ مَبْلَغًا. I did not engage in anything except that I reached in it considerable depth. حَتَّى الرَّمِي, even shooting. كُنْتُ أَرْمِي بَيْنَ الْغَرَضَيْنِ فَأُصِيبُ مِنَ الْعَشَرَةِ تِسْعَةً. I used to shoot between 2 targets and I would hit the bullseye 9 times out of 10. Sheikh Abdullah said he was able to hit it 10 times. He would miss on purpose. وَلَكِنَّ الْكَلَامَ لَا غَايَةَ لَهُ. However, the kalam, it has no extent. You can't reach its end. He's saying it's not like other fields where you can perfect it and قد you call conquer that and then move on. He's saying it doesn't stop. There's always something new or something afterwards. تناظروا في شيء إن أخطأتم فيه يقال لكم أخطأتم. Debate about something that if you are mistaken about it, it would be said to you, you are mistaken. لا تناظروا في شيء إن أخطأتم فيه يقال لكم كفرتم. Don't debate about something that if you are mistaken about it, it would be said about you, you blasphemed. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Hakam said, قال الشافعي. Ash-Shafi'i said, Ya Muhammad, O Muhammad, إن سألك رجل عن شيء من الكلام فلا تجبه. If a man asks you about anything concerning kalam, do not respond to him. فإنه إن سألك عن دية فقلت درهما أو دانقا قال لك أخطأت. For indeed, if he asked you about blood money, for example, not about kalam, if he asked you about blood money, for example, and then you said the blood money is a dirham, or the blood money is a daniq, like a sixth of a dirham, he will say to you, you are mistaken. وَإِن سَأَلَكَ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْكَلَامِ فَزَلَلْتَ. And if he asked you about something about the kalam and you slipped, قَالَ كَفَرْتَ. He will say, you blasphemed. وفي حكاية المزني عن الشافعي رحمه الله دلالة على أنه كان قد تعلم الكلام وبالغ فيه. And in the report of Al-Muzani about Ash-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy upon him, there is evidence that he had learned the kalam and that he became proficient at it. ثم استحب ترك المناظرة فيه عند الاستغناء عنها. And then he preferred to abandon debating about it when there's no need for it. وفي رواية زكريا بن يحيى الساجي عن الربيع في هذه الحكاية بعينها. And in the narration of Zakaria ibn Yahya as-Saji from Al-Rabi' about this very story, قال, he said, إن حضر علينا الشافعي من درجته يوما. Ash-Shafi'i came down from his steps to us one day. وهم يتجادلون في القدر. And they were debating concerning destiny. فقال, and so he said, إما أن تقوموا عنا أو تجاورونا بخير. He said, either you get up and leave from us, or you will be neighbors in goodness. فَلَأَنْ يَلْقَ اللَّهَ الْعَبْدُ بِكُلِّ ذَنْبٍ مَا خَلَى الشِّرْكَ بِاللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَنْ يَلْقَاهُ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ هَذِهِ الْأَهْوَاءِ. For indeed, for the slave to meet the judgment of Allah with every sin other than shirk is better than to meet that judgment with anything of these devious desires. فَإِنَّمَا أَرَادَ ذَمَّ مَذْهَبِ الْقَدَرِيَّةِ. He only meant here dispraising the way of the Qadariyah, the destiny deniers. أَلَا تَرَاهُ قَالَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ هَذِهِ الْأَهْوَاءِ. Don't you see that he said, with anything of these devious desires, yani he's pointing to something in particular. فَاسْتَحَبَّ تَرْكَ الْجِدَالِ فِيهِ. So he preferred to abandon debating about that. وَكَأَنَّهُ تَبِعَ فِيهِ مَا رَوَيْنَاهُ عَنْ عُمَرَ بْنِ الْخَطَّابِ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ عَنِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال. And it was as if he followed in that what we have reported from Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah accept his deeds, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he said, لا تجالسوا أهل القدر ولا تفاتحوهم الحديث. Do not sit with the people of destiny and do not open the discussion with them. That's a very good proof. I could have used that in previous situations. وَلَا تُفَاتِحُوهُمُ الْحَدِيثِ. And don't open the discussion with them. That part is not restricted to the people of Qadar. وَغَيْرَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَخْبَارِ الْوَارِدَةِ فِي مَعْنَاهِ. And other than that, amongst the various reports that came with that meaning. وعلى مثل هذا جرى أئمتنا في قديم الدهر. And according to the likes of this went our Imams in the old times, عند الاستغناء عن الكلام فيه, when there was no need to delve into talking about that. فإذا احتاجوا إليه أجابوا بما في كتاب الله عز وجل. Then when they needed that, they would answer with what is in the book of Allah, the mighty and great. ثم في سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then they would resort to what is in the sunnah of the messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. حتى حدثت طائفة سموا ما في كتاب الله عز وجل من الحجة عليهم متشابها, until there happened a group who called what is in the book of Allah of evidence against them ambiguous. وقالوا بترك القول بالأخبار أصلا, and they took the position of abandoning referring to the hadiths fundamentally. وزعموا أن الأخبار التي حملت إليهم لا تصح في عقولهم, and they claimed that the hadiths, the reports that were being used against them are not valid in their intellects. فقام جماعة من أئمتنا رحمهم الله بهذا العلم, and so there stood up a group of our Imams, may Allah have mercy upon them, who engaged in this intellectual approach. وَبَيَّنُوا لِمَنْ وُفِّقَ لِلصَّوَابِ وَرُزِقَ الْفَهْمَ أَنَّ جَمِيعَ مَا وَرَدَ فِي تِلْكَ الْأَخْبَارِ صَحِيحٌ فِي الْعُقُولِ. They clarify to whomever was granted the divine success to believe in what's correct and was provided with understanding, they clarified for such people that all of what came in those reports are correct in the intellects. وَمَا ادَّعَوْهُ فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنَ التَّشَابُهِ بَاطِلٌ فِي الْمَعْقُولِ, and that what they have claimed in the book of Allah to be ambiguous is invalid. Meaning, in the old days, the people of the Sunnah used to just use the ayahs from the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, and who was known for argumentation, claiming to have rational argumentation, were the heretics, especially the Mu'tazila. So those people, they were especially dangerous to the layman. And what were they being refuted with? Ayahs of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet. So what was their answer? Their answer was, these ayahs, these are mutashabih, they don't prove your point. And these hadiths, they're weak, they don't even make sense. So now what's Ahlus Sunnah going to do? It's like they're saying, you don't have anything from the mind, you don't have any rational argumentation, all you have is some mutashabih verses and some weak hadiths. So what's Ahlus Sunnah going to do? So some of the Imams, they stepped forward and they beat those people at their own game. وَحِينَ أَظْهَرُوا بِدَعَهُمْ وَذَكَرُوا مَا اغْتَرَّ بِهِ أَهْلُ الضَّعْفِ مِنْ شُبَهِهِمْ. So when those people exposed their heresies and mentioned that by which the weak people were deluded, when they mentioned their fallacies by which the weak people were deluded, أجابوا وكشفوا عنها بما هو حجة عليهم عندهم. They answered those heretics and exposed their fallacies with arguments that would be evidence according to them. You want a rational argument? All right, we'll give you a rational argument. So they argued with them with logical arguments, and then they crushed them. كما فعل الشافعي فيما حكينا عنه, like what Ash-Shafi did concerning what we have reported about him. لوجوب الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر, because of the obligation of bidding the good and forbidding the evil. وما في ترك إنكار المنكر والسكوت عليه من الفساد والتعدي. And because of what comes of abandoning objection to the evil and being silent to it, what corruption and transgression would become, what corruption and transgression would come of abandoning being silent in the face of the evil. وكانوا في القديم إنما يعرفون بالكلام أهل الأهواء. And they used to, in the old days, know Kalam to be for the people of devious desires. Yani, Kalam at first was not used for Ahlul Sunnah. They were not known for Kalam. They didn't use the word Kalam for what they used to do. They reserved the word Kalam for the argumentation of the deviants. فأما أهل السنة والجماعة فمعولهم فيما يعتقدون الكتاب والسنة. And as for the people of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah, their resort concerning what they believed was the book and the Sunnah. Like, for example, what's an example of someone who takes their opinion, what they think is a rational proof, as evidence over a hadith? Like those people who said paradise and hellfire, they don't exist yet. If you ask them why not, they would say, well, it doesn't make sense that they would exist. Why would they exist? There's no one there. Even according to you, no one would even be there yet. What are you saying? That Allah is a fool? Allah is no fool. There's no reason to create paradise and hell, and there's no one there. They don't exist yet. So they don't actually have an ayah that says that they don't exist yet. They don't have a hadith that says that they don't exist yet. They have their opinion of what they think it should be. Those are the people of the devious desires. فَكَانُوا لَا يَتَسَمَّوْنَ بِتَسْمِيَتِهِمْ. So the people of the Sunnah were not named with the name of those deviant ones, the people of Kalam. Zakaria ibn Yahya as-Saji said that Muhammad ibn Ismail said, I heard Abu Thawr and Hassan both saying, سمعنا الشافعي يقول, we heard Ash-Shafi'i saying, حكمي في أهل الكلام أن يضربوا بالجريد. My judgment concerning the people of Kalam is that they would be beaten with the jareed. If I'm not mistaken, the jareed is something from the palm tree. وَيُحْمَلُوا عَلَى الْإِبِلِ, and they would be carried around on the camel. وَيُطَافَ بِهِمْ فِي الْعَشَائِرِ وَالْقَبَائِلِ, and that they would be taken amongst the families and the tribes. وَيُنَادَى عَلَيْهِمْ, and there would be a call about them. هذا جزاء من ترك الكتاب والسنة. This is the payment for who abandons the book and the sunnah. وأقبل على الكلام, and approached the kalam. So Abu Dawood narrates from Abu Thawr that he said, I heard Ash-Shafi'i saying, من ارتدى بالكلام لم يفلح. Whoever dresses with the kalam will not be successful. وَإِنَّمَا يَعْنِي وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ, and he only means, and Allah knows best, كَلَامَ أَهْلِ الْأَهْوَاءِ, the talk of the people of devious desires. الَّذِينَ تَرَكُوا الْكِتَابَ وَالسُّنَّةِ, those who abandoned the book and the sunnah. وَجَعَلُوا مُعَوَّلَهُمْ عُقُولَهُمْ, and they made their resort their intellects. وَأَخَذُوا فِي تَسْوِيَةِ الْكِتَابِ عَلَيْهَا, and they took to equating their minds to the book of Allah. وَحِينَ حُمِلَتْ إِلَيْهِمُ السُّنَّةُ بِزِيَادَةِ بَيَانٍ, and whenever the sunnah would be given to them for additional clarity, لِنَقْضِ أَقَاوِيلِهِمْ, for invalidating their sayings, اتهموا رواتها, they would accuse the narrators of those reports. وَأَعْرَضُوا عَنْهَا, and they would turn away from those reports. Yani, that's something also a person needs to take into consideration before he rejects something, is who's reporting that. Because if he knows who's reporting that, then it will be a matter of calling that one a liar or not, or calling that one inaccurate. فأما أهل السنة فمذهبهم في الأصول مبني على الكتاب والسنة. As for the people of the Sunnah, their way in the fundamentals is based on the book and the Sunnah. وإنما أخذ من أخذ منهم في العقل إبطالا لمذهب من زعم أنه غير مستقيم على العقل. And whoever amongst them took by the intellect, only took by the intellect to invalidate, meaning to refute the way of those who claimed that the proper way is not straight in the intellect. وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقُ. And by Allah is the divine success.